You open your eyes, and the silence is louder than the battle ever was. The air is thick, not with noise but with something heavier, a pressure that hums in the ears. You smell iron and soil and something sweet that isn't sweetness at all. You are alive, but the world around you has forgotten how to breathe. Before we begin, if you're watching this from somewhere far from the Danube, maybe from a bright city skyline or a quiet village at dusk, take a moment to type where you are in the comments. History stretches further when we trace it together, across oceans and languages. Like and subscribe if you believe stories this old still have a pulse, because tonight, that pulse beats in the ashes of Mohács. The cannons had stopped at dusk. By dawn, the crows arrived. They came in clouds that blotted the sky, descending over the fields where the grass was still slick. The men who had marched beneath banners of lions and crescents now lay indistinguishable. Hungarian, Ottoman, mercenary, priest, each stripped of rank by death. The smoke from the powder wagons still clung to the reeds of the Seal Brook, where the king himself had vanished beneath the current, his gilded armor dragging him down like an anchor of fate. But this is not the story of kings. This is the story of what happened after the noise. The Ottoman camp moved like a tide. Soldiers, janissaries with their long matchlocks, sipahis with crimson-plumed helmets, picked through the corpses. They spoke little. The sound of boots sinking into mud was constant, rhythmic, as if the earth itself had taken to breathing again. "Alan Bunu," said one, kicking a body gently with the butt of his spear. "Take this one." From the high ground, an aga oversaw the collection. He was a man who had seen too many victories to mistake this one for glory. His ledger lay open on a crate beside him, parchment curling in the damp. For each captive, a mark. For each corpse stripped of armor, another note. Gold was tallied, horses were counted, but the true wealth was flesh. The empire's machinery stirred to life. In the market towns, days later, Ezek, Belgrade, Skopje, the trade began. Columns of prisoners trudged through the gates, wrists bound in twine, eyes hollow. Behind them came the wagons, piled with spoils, chalices, tapestries, swords that would be melted for their steel. Yet the buyers' eyes were not for the metal. They watched the captives. Young, strong, silent. In this new economy, silence was currency. Inside a tent striped in red and gold, two men sat across from each other. One wore the uniform of the Ottoman administration. The other, a merchant from Ragusa, his velvet coat stiff with dust from the road. "How many can you offer?" asked the official, his tone deliberate, almost bored. 47, the merchant replied, glancing at his ledger. "Mostly boys, some priests, 2 scribes, worth their weight in skill, not just strength." The official dipped his pen, wrote something, then looked up. "Their tongues?" "Mostly Hungarian. A few who speak Latin." A pause, then a half-smile. "Then they'll fetch double in Alexandria. Scholars, translators, the empire feeds on more than wheat and gold." Outside, the rain began again, soft, persistent, washing the blood into the soil. The merchant's men unrolled chains with practiced movements, their faces unreadable. Somewhere a child cried out, but the sound was swallowed by thunder. Was this what victory meant? The question hung in the damp air, though no one dared speak it. The Sultan's decree had been clear. All spoils belonged first to the state, then to those who served it. The empire did not waste. Even ruin was repurposed. In the villages beyond the battlefield, the remnants of the Hungarian army wandered like ghosts. One survivor, a soldier with his left hand burned to the bone, found himself at a well near Mohács. He looked into the water, expecting reflection, saw only the drifting film of ash. A voice behind him murmured in Turkish, "Drink, if you dare." He turned. A janissary stood there, his musket slung behind his shoulder. But there was no mockery in his voice, only fatigue. "We kill, you die. Tomorrow we march, but the silence stays." Neither man spoke again. The rain thickened. Somewhere distant, a bell rang from what had once been a church, though its steeple now leaned like a broken spear. By the week's end, the plain of Mohat became a ledger of its own, each mound a number, each absence a calculation. The empire moved on, efficient, unstoppable. Behind them, the land began to rot in silence, the grass too soaked with memory to grow straight again. And yet, in that silence, something else began. In the ruins of Buddha, merchants whispered of profit, scribes forged new registers, and children, those taken and those left behind, learned the language of their conquerors. Empires feed not just on conquest, but on memory, reshaped and resold until even the victims begin to believe the story was inevitable. The wind passed over the plain, stirring banners half buried in the mud. Somewhere beneath, a soldier's locket opened with the shift of the earth, revealing a painted face already fading. The silence deepened. But silence is never empty. It waits, it listens. And from that stillness, the machinery of empire began to hum again. Quiet, precise, endless. Fade to black. The sea wind carried the smell of salt and tallow through the streets of Istanbul, winding between domes that glittered like coins under the morning sun. Below the mosques and palaces, beneath the marble courtyards and echoing prayers, another world pulsed. A network of corridors, chambers, and ledgers where the living were catalogued with the same precision as silk or spice. The Ottoman Empire, so vast it could swallow kingdoms whole, had perfected the art of turning conquest into inventory. In the records, the word was ganimet, spoils of war, but in the marketplace they were simply goods. The story begins not in a palace, but in a courtyard hidden behind the Han of Mahmud Pasha, where the smell of damp straw mixed with sweat and myrrh. A line of women stood in silence, their eyes covered with thin veils not of modesty, but of control. Their names had been erased at the border. Now they were numbers. A scribe sat cross-legged on a rug, ink-stained fingers flipping through parchment. He wrote with mechanical calm, each stroke of his reed pen another life assigned to a column. "One Hungarian, age 16, he murmured. 2 Bosnian girls, 1 Greek widow. He paused only to dip his pen again. From the doorway a buyer entered, robes of Bursa silk, turban bright as saffron. His rings flashed as he lifted a veil. The girl beneath did not flinch, though her lip trembled like a reed in the wind. "Teeth?" he asked as though inspecting a horse. The overseer nodded to an attendant who tilted her chin, revealing perfect white. "Healthy," he confirmed. The buyer smiled slightly. "For the harem or the house?" "Her fate depends on your purse," came the reply. Outside, the call to prayer rolled over the rooftops, solemn and unbroken. The city bowed in reverence, even as the commerce of flesh continued in the shadows of its mosques. In the imperial chancery across the Bosphorus, clerks compiled the ledgers that made it all lawful. Orders were stamped with the Sultan's tura, declaring each captive not as a human soul, but as taxable property. The bureaucracy was immaculate. Rows of numbers, columns of origins, destinations, and duties owed. Bureaucracy gave conquest its permanence. The route stretched from the Balkans to Anatolia, a river of bodies that flowed alongside the trade in timber, salt, and gold. In Edirne, auctions were held in open courtyards. In Bursa, beneath latticed awnings where merchants sipped sherbet and placed bets on lineage and skin. Across the empire, the same formula repeated: capture, transport, inspection, sale. Was there a difference, then, between empire and enterprise? Between faith and profit? In the diary of a Venetian agent, found centuries later, a line reads, "We traded with them as equals, though the goods were of human breath." Venice supplied ships. Ragusa, the ledgers. Ottoman ports received the spoils. A silent partnership of necessity. Christian coin fed Muslim markets, and vice versa. The world, it seemed, could agree on at least one universal language: profit. In one surviving court record, a woman named Esther appears, a name foreign on Ottoman paper. She had been taken near Mohat and sold in Bursa. Her petition to the Qadi, the Islamic judge, was brief but precise. She sought manumission after bearing her master's child. The verdict was merciful by law, but not by grace. The document ends in ink, faded by tears, her fate left blank. The camera of imagination might move now through the alleyways of the Bedestan, the great covered market. Candles gutter in glass lamps. Traders call out in Arabic, Turkish, Greek. Silver trays gleam beside bolts of fabric, but the true commerce happens deeper within. Behind carved cedar doors, buyers haggle in whispers, not over spices but over silence itself. A eunuch in white silk counts coins on a low table. A girl kneels before him, her wrists bound loosely with cord, eyes downcast. He does not look at her as he speaks. Her skin is fair. She will fetch 300 akçe if trained, twice that if she sings. "Does she speak Turkish?" asks the buyer. "Not yet," the eunuch replies, "but the tongue learns quickly when it must." In the distance the Bosphorus murmurs, a constant, restless sound, as though the sea itself keeps record of every secret traded above it. By night, the city sleeps under its domes of gold and lead. In the courtyards of the palace, fountains whisper beside the harem walls. Inside, new arrivals learn the language of survival, bows, silences, the art of being seen only when summoned. The empire polished its surface to brilliance, but its foundations were built on murmurs and chains. From the mountains of Albania to the sands of Cairo, the trade routes glowed faintly with torchlight. Caravans moved under banners marked with crescents, the clinking of shackles hidden beneath the sound of camel bells. Every step was accounted for, every breath taxed. And yet, in the margins of a merchant's book, a small note remains. One escaped near Sophia, a girl of red hair, worth more for her absence than her sail. Somewhere beyond the empire's reach, perhaps she found the sea, or perhaps she vanished like so many others, folded into history's silence. The empire thrived, and its ledgers thickened. Every generation added new names, new prophets, new justifications. The markets of Istanbul and Bursa glittered by daylight, but below their marble floors lay a different ledger still, written not in ink, but in absence. The wind rose again, carrying the scent of musk and iron from the docks. Somewhere, the chains clinked faintly as they were gathered for the next voyage. The city never stopped moving, never stopped counting. And beneath it all, the silence waited, measured, priced, and ready to be sold again. Fade to black. The earth remembers what men try to forget. Beneath plowed fields and olive roots, bones whisper when the rain comes heavy. The stones of forgotten wells still echo with names no one speaks aloud. The empire fell, its banners rotted to dust, but its silence survived, woven into bloodlines, customs, and faces that no longer know their origin. In a sun-baked field near Pex, an archaeologist kneels beside a narrow trench. The soil crumbles under her brush, revealing the faint curve of a skull. Around it lie iron clasps, a broken rosary, fragments of ceramic glazed in turquoise. Her gloves are steady, but her breath quickens. Another grave, another unnamed woman whose death was not recorded, only implied. Nearby, the hum of drones surveys the site, the soft whirring a modern echo of the old machinery of empire, precise, methodical, inhumanly calm. Female, early 20s, one researcher murmurs, healed fractures on the ribs. She was alive long enough to bear them. The data goes into a tablet, another ledger, another system cataloging what once was human. Centuries earlier, the same air carried a different sound, the chant of merchants, the clatter of caravans, the bargaining tones of empire. The blood that fed those markets dried long ago, but it hardened into something else: legacy. The families who once traded flesh became dynasties of influence. Their palaces stand still, their fountains still flow, but the inscriptions name only the victors. In Istanbul, a scholar examines a document in the archives of the Topkapi Palace. The parchment is brittle, but the ink is still sharp, rows of transactions sealed in imperial script. Each entry follows a formula: age, origin, price, condition. At the bottom, a faint annotation, transferred to the Enderun school. The scholar traces the letters slowly. That school trained the empire's elite. The children listed here had been taken from Christian villages, baptized once, renamed twice. She leans back, closing her eyes. The silence in the archive feels heavy, like a room filled with invisible witnesses. Who writes history, she wonders, and who erases it? Across the sea, in a laboratory in Dubrovnik, another researcher holds a vial of clear liquid to the light. DNA strands glimmer on her monitor. Anomalies, links between populations once thought distinct. A Balkan genome with Turkish markers. A Turkish family line that traces to Transylvania. The data tells what the ledgers never confessed. The empire did not just conquer land. It absorbed people until even blood forgot its borders. Outside, the Adriatic sparkles. Tourists pass stone walls built by hands that may have once been bound. They take photos, eat ice cream, laugh. The past hums beneath their footsteps like an unseen current. Meanwhile, in a small village near Bursa, an old woman keeps a chest wrapped in linen. Inside, among yellowed prayer beads and letters, lies a miniature portrait. A woman with auburn hair, painted in fading oils, wearing Ottoman silk. No one in the family knows who she was. An ancestor, perhaps, they say, a noblewoman. But her eyes tell another story. Defiance beneath compliance, the faint trace of a name erased. The camera lingers on the portrait's gaze. Then the sound of the wind rises, carrying faint voices. Hungarian, Greek, Albanian, Arabic, blending into one long sigh. Was the empire truly gone, or had it only changed its mask? The bureaucracies remained, reshaped into nations. The ledgers became censuses. The classifications endured in subtler forms. History rebranded what it could not bury. At a museum in Vienna, a curator arranges artifacts from the Ottoman period. Among the ceramics and coins sits a small silver bracelet, inscribed with an unfamiliar name, Esther, 1527. The tag beneath it reads only, "Unidentified captive jewelry." Visitors pass by, barely glancing. The curator watches them go, then turns back to the display. "Unidentified," she whispers, "but not forgotten." A storm builds outside the museum windows, rain striking the glass in rhythmic bursts. For a moment it sounds like footsteps, thousands of them, marching from the past into the present. In another part of the world, a young woman uploads her DNA results. The screen flashes with colored maps, percentages, probabilities, ancestral threads crossing continents. She frowns, tracing a thin blue line labeled Anatolia. "Strange," she says softly. "I thought we were all from here." But no one in her family knows that 5 centuries earlier, one of their foremothers walked the road from Mohacs to Bursa in chains. History does not vanish. It transforms into memory disguised as blood. As dusk settles over Istanbul, the domes gleam like old coins in fading light. The call to prayer drifts through the air, mingling with the sound of ferries on the Bosphorus. Beneath the city, tunnels stretch like veins through stone, a labyrinth of cisterns and forgotten cellars where traders once counted their coin by candlelight. The air is cool, damp, and utterly still. If you listen closely, the silence there is not empty. It breathes. It carries the weight of those who could not speak. Their names are gone, but their presence remains. Ghosts, not of vengeance, but of endurance. The archaeologist from Pek visits Istanbul years later. She walks the grand bazaar, its chaos of color and sound overwhelming after so much dust and quiet. Yet, as she passes a stall selling antiques, she stops. Among the trinkets, a small pendant catches her eye, silver, worn smooth, engraved with a single word. Esther. She turns it over in her hand. The air feels colder suddenly, as if the past has leaned close to whisper. Somewhere, beneath centuries of marble and forgetting, the empire stirs once more. Not in glory, not in conquest, but in remembrance. The ghosts are not gone. They are simply waiting to be heard.